Well, welcome to Walking in Spirit and Truth. I am one of your hosts, Sandi Craig, and we are so glad that you're joining us right now, tonight, or later down the road if you're listening to a rebroadcast or on our Life of Worship YouTube page. Either way, we are glad that you are here today, and we are talking about Psalm 1. We have been taking a long journey through this, and we've actually been stuck on the word derek or way for the last several weeks. Is that going to change this week? No, we're going to continue on that path, but there's a reason because there's lots to uncover. There's so much meaning when you go into the Hebrew. There's so much more meaning when you study out the word. What does it say in his word? It is the glory of Yah to conceal a matter, and it's the honor of kings to search it out. Well, you're supposed to be a priest and a king, therefore you should be searching out the word. Yes, that's you and me. We need to study it out and look deeper into what's Yah's just put before us to unfold before us, to show us who He is, and also to show us who we need to be. That's through His Torah. That is through His instructions. Yes. So let's turn in our scripture to Psalm 1:1. And it says, blessed or happy is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers. Okay, let's do a quick review of some of the things we've learned over the last 3 weeks when we talk about derek, way. Of course, the simple meaning is way, road, distance, journey, manner. That's your surface meaning. Okay, we got that. Pretty simple. But when you start looking deeper, there's so much more. And we've talked about gates and all sorts of other things in connection. We're not going to rehash it, but we are going to do an overview. Of course, we know that derek, or the way, is your way of life. And when we look into the paleo, we can clearly see how it is that Messiah, who is the way, is connected to all of it. Because when the paleo, it's as we come to the door, Messiah, the tent of appointment, and we are able to come and submit under the hand of our master and chief, Yeshua, who gives us access to his presence. Isn't that what we want? His presence. We want to find rest. And when we follow the path of righteousness, because when we look at derek or way, we know there are two ways. Again, this is review, but we're connecting the dots, putting it all together. And we also discovered that our way is connected to what we say, not just what we do, not just where our foot treads, not just our actions, but even in what we say. What's derek? What's the way? We need to figure that out by following his word, or choose a different path. There's two paths, remember. Now, we also reviewed, when we review it, we saw that derek, D-E-R-E-K, is connected to derek, number 1869. And that word was to tread, to bend, to lead, to march, to trample. And that it's following the way has this military context to it, because when you look at this word that's connected to it, it's like the sound of feet that are forcefully hitting the ground, trampling on something. So it's not just this leisurely journey if you're following the way, his way, or even the other way, because you can march and trample the other direction too. But it's like a military march where you're breaking the enemy, and all that he's tried to do, putting it under your feet and going forward. So if you think that following the way is this pleasant stroll, no, it's a military march, like a group, because we are an army, right? We are an army connected hand to hand, arm in arm. We're supposed to be united. So it's this group of us that we're connected. We're marching together, going forth forcefully. Our feet are hitting the ground, and we're trampling upon anything that would exalt itself against the kingdom of Yahweh, which of course is a different path, which is Hasatan's path. If we have Yeshua's path and there's another path, the other one's going to be the enemy. It's going to be the counterfeit. It's just the way it works. We also learned that the way, derek, is connected to mishpat, or judgment. Okay, we get that, because we're either going to see blessing or we're going to see curse. It's that way with everything. Which is it going to be? So we understand that the generation that learns to walk in the way, this generation, hopefully, what are we going to do? We're going to walk in power and authority and possess our rightful inheritance that's been promised from Yah. Okay. Little review over the last 3 weeks. Tune into the other programs and get a lot more detail of that. But we also understand that when we're looking at Derek, that its Semitic root, which we looked at a little bit already when we looked at the paleo, is a doorway or path that leads into someone's presence. And whose presence do we want to be in? Yah's. Are we seeking someone else's presence? Is that our desire? Because if so, then we've gotten off the path and we are ending up on a path that enters into chaos, not to rest, not to Yeshua. So what are we going to do? Well, we have a choice to make. Each and every day, we have a choice to make. Are we going to walk on his path or another path? Because when we look at it, if we're gathering, if we're following a way, and that way is understanding that it's going into someone's presence, it's like a marriage relationship where your whole world is your spouse. Our whole world is supposed to be Yeshua. Actions, dreams, plans, it revolves around him. Yes, it does our spouse too, but we need to understand that we've been purchased with a price and that we are his. And if we are the bride and Yeshua is our bridegroom, then our dreams and our plans should revolve around him. In fact, we need to pray, Father, make make your desires my desires, because our hearts need to be changed. Our hearts need to be bent towards him in his way and what he wants for us, not what we want, because ultimately that's going to lead in a direction sometimes which isn't the perfect path we should be on. It can lead us down something else, and it's a long journey to get back on track. Have you ever done it? I have. I've followed what I thought was right. In reality, I think I convinced myself what was right. And used all this evidence to convince myself it was right. And deep down, I think I knew. And it took a long time to get back on where I was going forward with what he was wanting me to do with my life. It was never evil or doing anything like that. It was just my way. Well, guess what? Our way is not necessarily the right way. In fact, oftentimes it's not. So here we have this following the way is this idea of making whose way you're following your world. Now, if your way is for power and influence and money and prestige and materialism, the God of this world is your God, and you're going to do whatever it takes to get all of that. Well, shouldn't we do whatever it takes to get into his presence? Yes. So when you think about that, if you think about in the marriage context, you leave the world of singleness, right? Where you enter into a world where you actually care about another person, and eventually you're supposed to multiply, so you have kids. So should it be with us. We've left the world and enter into a different kingdom. Therefore, Yeshua is our world. And then what do? We should multiply. We multiply. We spread his word. We bring it out. Now, here's something that you might find surprising. Traditionally, the Jewish people or the sages say that when you are married, you are born again. Now let that one sink in for a minute. We have always learned in the Christian church that born again, and I believe it's very valid. Now I've heard arguments otherwise, but when you look at it from this perspective, we become born again when we traditionally, when we say, Yeshua, I want to follow you. You forgive me of my sins. You died, you were resurrected, rose again, and you are the way, the truth, and the life. There is no other. And I want to follow you. So you're born again. Isn't that sort of like saying, I do? I do. So in that context, when you look at tradition, the tradition of the sages and things, being born again is coming into that relationship when you're married. Well, we're supposed to be committed to our bridegroom, the bridegroom. Yes, I guess you can look at it as your spouse here on earth, but let's look at it more spiritually. So that word born again, we've been born anew. It's like we're entering into this new place, this new kingdom. So born again, yes, there's a lot more to that. Maybe I'll do a study on it with you one of these days, but that should just tweak your ears for a minute. Eddie and Tammy said there's a name change with the marriage for the wife. We will get a new name when we get our resurrected body. Yes, that is right. Have you ever wondered what it's going to be? I have. I've thought about that before. Because names are prophetic. And I know that with a new name, we're in his kingdom, et cetera, et cetera. But names mean something. So what's your name? Look into the meaning of that name, because I guarantee you're going to find that you're either going to be living in the blessing part of that or the other side of that name, because words have power, and that includes when we speak a name. Okay, from that sidetrack, but it's really true. You take his name. We take his name. We are the bride. We take his name. We have a new name. So with Messiah as our bridegroom, which he is supposed to be, we are in what kind of relationship? Relationship with Yahweh. Yes. If we really want to be intimate in our relationship with him, we must be willing to do what? We have got to be willing to make the sacrifice. And what is that sacrifice? We're supposed to go out into the world and change it, because it should revolve around him. Our lives should revolve around him and his word. And how do we get it? How do we live this according to what he wants for us? Does that mean we don't ever enjoy, that we don't take hold of everything around us? No, that doesn't mean that. But along the journey that we have a mission that has been given, that we are to go and make disciples of all nations and heal the sick, make the blind see, the dead rise and the lame walk. And there are spiritual meanings to that, but there are physical meanings to that. That's the mission you're on. And your mission field is right where you're at. Your job, your whether you're retired, whether you go out to work, whether you're in your home, whether you're in your community, your neighborhood, your congregation. Yeah, there are people that need to hear the word, even in the congregation, because sometimes they're just there. Shocker, right? Well, there you go. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We have this tendency, though. We want to make Yahweh fit into our world, join our way, fit in our way, the way we do things. And then what happens? We're making a Yeshua or Jesus in our own image. You say, well, that's not me. Is it? Because are we willing to sacrifice what we think, what we want, to do what he wants? Sometimes we think in our head, yes, but our actions say differently. We cannot make a God in our image. You hear people saying things like that all the time, and it just doesn't work like that. When you look at Psalm 25, verse 4, don't have my reader here right now because I had him ready for that, but it really tells us that we have to leave this world and go to his world. Where are we supposed to be? Only visiting this planet, which is, of course, our old show moniker, right? Now, I want to look at this word, derek, as we spoke of earlier, to tread, to trample. Let's look at that one more time, and let's look at a different word or a different scripture using way, derek, in that format. And that goes back to one of our old studies that we've done, Psalm 9:13, or Psalm 91. And it says, you shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent, you shall trample underfoot. Tread there is, what is that? Derek, the way. So when you look at a lion, a cobra, a serpent, a young lion, what do all those things have in common? Well, I can tell you, if John saw a cobra or a serpent under his foot, he would freak out. He would be scared. He would run. He'd scream like a girl, because I've heard it. But some would do that. The roar of a lion has that. When a lion roars, its frequency that it roars out is that frequency of terror. So all of these animals can induce terror. So what does that mean when it says we should tread upon the lion, the cobra, the young lion, and shall trample on with the serpent, we should trample underfoot? Well, that word tread, derek, which is path away, we can understand it as, think of those things as the enemy. Are we supposed to run or scream or be scared or frightened in any form or format, when we come upon something that seems to be the enemy, something along our path which shouldn't be there, no, that is not the way we walk out this walk. Again, let's look at it in a spiritual context, because derek is also an idiom for being Torah observant, as well as treading down an enemy in battle. Well, who is your enemy? Think about it. Who is your enemy? What are you battling right now? What are you walking out? What are you walking through? And we know that we battle not against flesh and blood. Understand that. Our real enemy can maybe manifested in something seen, but it's really rooted in something unseen. Hasatan himself, his cohorts, all his plans and purposes are to steal, kill, and destroy. So we have that understanding and knowing that when the enemy throws something in our path, we are not to be fearful. We are to walk in his way, tread down the enemy. He's under our feet, under our feet, under our feet. So we will follow we're going to follow the path of the lions and the poisonous snakes, because that's a different way. And when we're on a different path, those things will come up on us and they can consume us, kill us, destroy us, hurt us, maim us. But not if we're on his path and we're walking in his way and trusting him and using our word as a sword, walking in Torah, walking in his instruction. Because those who seek to destroy you, who seek to destroy me, or overpower us to get into our family, to our community, they threaten us with their words. They threaten us with action. Even even natural phenomenon can bring terror into people's hearts. Earthquakes and twisters and tornadoes and hurricanes. Or let's look at the financial storms that we've been walking out these years. The threat constantly of the economy collapsing, the not having the paper money anymore, not the inflation. We could probably go on and on. That can bring some terror in people's hearts. Well, we don't worry about that. Hopefully we've all bought into Yah's kingdom, not Yah's financial kingdom, by following his instruction on what we're supposed to do with our money. Yeah. Eddie and Tammy said gas pipe prices going through the roof. Yeah, they are right now. And that's ridiculous. That's a whole nother story that if John were here, I know he'd like to talk about it, but not this show. That's right. Not this show. So those terrors are out there. They're in our path. They seem to be encroaching upon us, but no. We have a shield and a buckler, Yeshua HaMashiach, who takes the arrows that the enemy tries to throw at us if we're walking on his path. But if we're on a different path, he's not there, calling out to us, saying, come on, let's make this thing right. Get back, follow me. But if we're on a different path, remember I've talked to you, if we're following, we've got this covering, and that covering's there. If we go any other direction, we've lost that covering. We've got to choose. So if you look at this passage one more time, anything that strikes terror in our hearts, every conspiracy theory or fact theory, better said, every horrible news report, every report of impending disaster and doom, natural, man-made, any threat of man against us, we can just walk over it as we follow Yah's path, as we follow his way, because he's laid out a specific path for us. And that is where there's shalom. Even in the midst of war, there can be war, literal war all around you. People dying on every side, but it will not come nigh you. That is his promise, because we're on his path. We will just place our foot on the head of each terror, of each thing that would try to exalt itself against Yah's kingdom, and we declare victory over it. Okay, remember that. Remember that in this everyday life, that we have to face these enemies that try to stand in front of us and block our way, change our hearts, get our eyes off of him and what he's wanting us to do. So let's look at this phrase just for a moment. We're going to get into the way of sinners more, not this program, but I want to briefly look at it for a minute as we continue with this thought. By not standing in the way of sinners, what happens? We're not following their way, their custom, their walk, their way of life, their team, battling with them. their manner of scoring, then we are blessed. And think about this. Proverbs 12:15 says, the fool's way is right in his own eyes. How many of us have walked in that path before? Because I've done it. And we probably all, if we were honest, could confess that we've walked as the fool and done things our own way before. Yeah, been there, done that. But what we are supposed to do is meditate on the law of Yah all the time. Meditate on his word, declare his word, proclaim his word. So we have this word here from Herbert Wolf, and it says, it's talking about the in context to Psalm 1. He says, even after giving of the law, Israel quickly deviated from the way of the Lord, Deuteronomy 9:16. Though they were assured that their ways would not be successful, Deuteronomy 28:29. So this goes back to this idea of word, wombing his word within our hearts and our minds. What happens when we womb it? It becomes part of us. When we think about it, when we meditate on it, when we pray, when we just talk to Yahweh about it. That's what prayer is talking. Well, what happens is we're meditating on that law, and it's going to bring his instruction, and it's going to make us fruitful. It's going to cause us to prosper. Maybe not in the way that the world considers prosperous, but we're not of the world. Everything is different for us. But if we stand in the way of sin, or if we walk in their way, then it's ultimately going to lead to death. It will lead to death. In fact, we're supposed to remind our sons of the way to walk. My son, be mindful, Yahweh your Elohim, all the days, and let not thy will be set to sin or to transgress his commandments. Do uprightly all thy life long, and follow not the ways of the unrighteous. Over and over again, we're going to see that reminder: do not follow the way of the unrighteous. Am I preaching to the choir? Yes, but sometimes we need to solidify those things in our hearts. And I'm going to get to some other things here in a minute too, as we discuss this, because if maybe you're dealing with something and there's something that seems right in your own eyes, but there's some sort of seed within you that it's just not right. It's just not right. Jeremiah defines way as a synonym with doings. And we've talked about that, what you're doing in life. I, the Lord, search the heart and try the rein, and give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. Jeremiah 17:10. But you can also, there's a whole bunch of other scriptures you can look at in Jeremiah. And it will talk about how it's about us doing things. What are we doing? What are we doing? Because doing is connected to our way. How do we fill our days? What way are we following? Do we compromise here and there? So do we sort of get on the path, hop off the path, get on the path, hop off the path? What are we doing? If we're honest, let's think about it. Then you go to Hosea 4:9. It says, and it will be like people, like the priests. So I will punish them for their what? Their ways, and repay them for their deeds. Hosea 12:2. Yahweh has a case against Judah and will punish Jacob according to what? His ways. He will repay him according for his deeds. Guys, do you want to be repaid according to the deeds? Or the thoughts? Or your words? Because your words also are connected to the way. Ow. And then you go to Zechariah 1:4, and it says, do not be like your fathers, to whom the former prophets proclaimed, saying, this is what the Lord of armies says, return now from all your evil ways and from your evil deeds. But they did not listen or pay attention to me, declares the Lord. And then you look at Judges 2:19, but it came about when the judge died that they would turn back and act more corruptly than their fathers. In following other gods, served them and bowed down to them. They did not abandon their practices or their obstinate ways. Derek. Jeremiah 17:10. I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give each person according to his ways. One more time. According to the result of his deeds. One more time we say that. So let's look at the other side. Because remember, if you look at following one path is going to lead to certain results, which is death and all destruction, on all those things we just listed. But then you have the other side that Psalm 1:2 talks about. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and the leaf doesn't wither, and he prospers in what he does, everything he does. So Jeremiah is really offering commentary on being a blessed man, even on Psalm 1, when he is talking through so many of the scriptures. Read through Jeremiah and get some of it. So prophets were there to tell you where you should go, what you should do. And ultimately, most of the time, the people didn't listen. I know as a pastor, sometimes I get so frustrated, pastor, a teacher, a preacher, all of those things, a mother, friend, you get frustrated because you have best interest at heart, and sometimes people just don't listen. 1 Samuel 9:6 says, but he said to him, behold, now there's a man of God in the city, and the man is held in honor. Everything that he says definitely comes true. Now let's go there. Perhaps he can tell us about our journey on which we've set out. Prophet. 1 Samuel says 9:8, the servant answered Saul again and said, look, I have in my hand a fourth of a shekel in silver, and I will give it to the man, and he will tell us our way. So they're looking, what way are we supposed to go? Now, that puts us to, we can't use the prophets or prophecy as the easy way to figure out what we're supposed to do, because we all like the easy road. We do. And I've been in places before where people just go into a room and get prophecy specifically for them. I'm not saying it's all wrong, because I've received prophecy over our family has, and it's really played out as true. But just prophecy on demand, I'm not so sure that's the way it works. And of course, the prophets of old oftentimes were speaking to the nation. Sin nature always drives the people quickly from what? From Yahweh, from his commandments. Let's go back to Exodus 32:8. They have quickly, what I say? Said quickly, turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made for themselves a cast metal calf and have worshipped it and have sacrificed to it and said, this is your God, Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt, the way. Then we have the tree of life. We talked about that before too. Genesis 3:24, the tree of life. And then we have that the way was blocked. Yes, Yah destroyed the earth because of the flood, because of man's corrupted way. So we can see over and over just Yah telling us follow the way. If he's saying follow the way over and over, and once doesn't seem to be enough, and then giving us examples of those who did not follow his way, the way we talk, the way we act, are we treading? Do we fear? Do we trample on the enemy like an army? Do we realize that the way involves judgment, good or bad? Judgment can be good or bad. Are we walking that out? Are we just living life as it comes? Sometimes that's really not what's supposed to happen. We should live our lives on purpose. David said that keep the charge of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statute and his commandments and his judgments and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, and whatsoever thou turnest thyself, that the Lord may continue his word, which he spake concerning me, saying, if thy children take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth, with all their heart and with all their soul and with all, there shall not fail thee, said he, a man on the throne of Israel. 1 Kings 2:3-4. Now, we ultimately know how that turned out. But it's no different than us, because we depart from the path as well. We depart. It's something we do, unfortunately. Isaiah records the words of sinners that express this idea, hey, we're sinning, basically saying, we're better than you, Yahweh. We're sinning, we love what we're doing, and we're not changing. Well, you may say, well, I would never say that. But look around. There are people whose actions, their way, who they hang with, et cetera, really is in an affront to Yahweh. And remember, if we're walking in his way, then we walk in his power and authority and remove those things that would exalt itself above the kingdom of Yahweh. Let's just read the scripture, Isaiah 65:5. Who say, keep to yourself, do not come near me, for I am holier than you. These are smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all the day. We need to walk in his way, not the way of sinners. Again, told you I was briefly going to look at that kata, the way of sinners, that masculine plural adjective. And Numbers 32:14 says, now behold, you have risen up your father's place, born of sinful men, to add still more to the burning anger of the Lord against Israel. See, this describes the activity of people, a certain people, which becomes their characteristic identifier. So one more time, what you're doing, how you're acting now as literally a label on how people see you and identify who you are. So whatever way you've chosen, people can see it, and that becomes part of who you are. It's part of how you live and breathe, your actions. Now, some would say, well, it's not really who I am. It's just what I did right there. No, guys, there's always a reason that we do what we do. And when we've gone the wrong path, usually it started here, the battle of the mind, the battle for the mind, what we've been focusing on, where our gaze has been set, where our heart has been. And it literally causes those very characteristics. Whomever we spend time with, we're going to be like them. If it's with Yahweh, we're going to be like Yahweh. So Albert Barnes says, a sinner's kata, that the word literally means those who miss the mark. And we've talked about that. Those who err from the path of duty and rectitude. It often is used to denote any kind of degree of sin. It's more specific than the former word rendered ungodly, as denoting those who depart from the path of duty, who fail in regard to the great end of life, who violate positive and known obligations. Okay, so if we're looking at sinners as missing the mark, again, we're not doing the complete study on that right now. What they've sought a different path. Well, what are we supposed to be seeking? The path of righteousness. What are we pursuing? We are to be pursuing that path of righteousness, because Yahweh leads us into what is profitable and what is good, what is going to bring forth blessing. But oftentimes we don't do that. And as Joe says, she's been an area of testing. Well, we often are in an area of testing. All of us, we walk through that, in and out of that. It's test, and then there's another test. I want us to look real quickly at something David said. And I'll read John's scripture real quick. John is actually on the road. He said, Luke 21:34, but be on your guard so that your hearts are not weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day close down upon you suddenly like a trap. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's look at Psalm 139:24. Psalm 139:24 says, and if you see any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. Let's focus in hurtful way. Would we ever pray that? Father, if you see a hurtful way in me, if you see hurtful conversation, if you see a hurtful way of life, if you see me walking down and spending time in the path, in the way of in the way of the world, get rid of it in me. How many are willing to pray that? And what does that actually mean? Okay. And see if there be any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. Make things right, Father. I do not want to walk in the way of the ungodly, the way of unrighteousness, in the path of sinners. So what's the purpose of inviting Yah to search your inner thoughts? Sometimes that can be pretty scary. Not that it's scary for Yah to do it, but when you pray prayers like that, often there's a test and there's a purging and there's a sifting that follows along. It hurts. And when you're being molded and made, it's the potter is manipulating the clay, and it can be difficult sometimes, but the end result is good. It's a good thing. But why did David say, Yah, search my heart? Because David knew that we have this tendency to go off kilter. And he said, I don't want that. No matter what the cost, I want there to be the right way of life in me, in my mind, in my heart, my spirit, all of it. So David spells it out. He isn't going to God for a checkup saying, hey, give me a checkup, give me the kudos saying, oh, David, you're doing great. Oh, Sandy, you're doing great. Oh, John, you're doing great. That's not how David's doing it. No, he's saying, come in here like a surgeon. Look inside of me. Look inside my heart. Look inside my life and cut away those things that shouldn't be there. He's asking for a spiritual tumor to be removed from him. Spiritual disease, this spiritual disease. What kind of disease? What kind of tumor is it? Well, it's a derek oseb, which is the path of sorrows. What does that mean? Well, let's just look at this a minute. Let's look at the synonym for this kind of derek oseb, this kind of tumor, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of synonyms that go along with this, and I'm not going to go into a big study on any of them right now, but the root is a sob. So it relates to physical pain as well as emotional sorrow. And its similar words are heel or hul and hara, which means to writhe, to be hot with anger, yaga, which is to grieve, la'e, which is to become tired and weary, ka'as, which is to be irritated or angry, marar, which is to be bitter and despairing, kut, which is to feel disgust, kus is to, which is another to feel a disgust, tewa is trouble, and rogez is turmoil. So let's put all these things together. What is David doing? All of these words relate to Oseb, derek Oseb, the path of sorrows. And he's saying, hey, search me, Father, search me. So David asked Yahweh, he says, examine him, see if you can find anything that causes others physical or emotional pain. See if you can find anything that causes anger, or look in me and see if you can find a grievous behavior or hurtful attitude, pride. See if you can look in me and see if there's things that I do that lead to despair or that are irritating, that are there things that I am, or thoughts or patterns that are bitter or have disgust related to them. Look inside of me and see, do I trouble others? Do I cause turmoil inside other people or myself? See, David considers any of these or all of these things, I would probably better said, as symptoms of wickedness, symptoms of unrighteousness. And he wants the surgeon, the great physician, to cut him away from him so that all that remains is life. All that remains is that which would bring forth life to others. Do I hurt other people? Do I do this to other people? So what is the purpose of this behavioral surgery? Well, what began as anxiety about God's intimate knowledge and deeply personal experiences, this exists. It's become a necessary examination to find derek olam, which is what? The path everlasting. Because if those things, when we're examining those things that we just mentioned, and we tread there, or we have a tendency to go there, or even off and on, we've hurt others in one way or the other, we're not necessarily on the right path. At least in that area of our heart and our life. We're to bring forth life. Derek Olam, the path everlasting. Maybe the Yah who sees us is the only one who knows where to cut. Cut that way out of us so that we aren't walking in the path of sinners. Cut the way out of me. Could you pray that? Father, cut that out of me. Examine my heart. Examine my life. Is there a hurtful way within me? I don't know. It's a prayer you have to think about because you have to be ready. But is it worth it? We may say we're following his instructions and we're doing the doings, but we're even talking some of the talk. But sometimes along our journey are people that have been run over by us, maybe unintentionally, but the result is the same. And the truth does cause division. I'm not talking about that. But sometimes we act and react instead of thinking and understanding. So when we say we're going to walk in his way, Which way are we walking? We got to examine our life, our thoughts, our mind, our heart, the words we say, the things we do, what lifestyle we're living, but also the mistakes we've made along the journey, because there may be a seed of something else that just needs taken care of. John said there's repeated patterns that cause repeated hurtful ways. Why, oh Yah, causing unintentional hurt in others. And that's what we're talking about here. This keeps happening. Why does it happen? Sometimes these repeated patterns that are in our lives, they're from generational curses. They're from demonic oppression, habit, which habit can become curses and all of the rest too. But we need to examine our hearts and our life. And sometimes that needs uprooted from us. And it's painful. And here's one of the things too. Sometimes it's just really hard to admit that you have failed in an area. You don't want to face it, because if you say the word or somebody else tells you, you get offended because you don't want to say it. But you have to acknowledge the problem before you can have it removed from you, or before that area of your life can be changed for the better. You got to acknowledge that there's an issue to start with. And that's going to involve a deep heart examination for the way, what derek are we following? So make it your prayer. It's time. Why walk around with the extra baggage and leave bodies along the journey? Mistakenly, probably for most of us, yes, but still casualties nonetheless. Anyway, John goes on to say only Yah can break the patterns perfectly. Not 30 years of counseling, not 20, not 10, not 5, not paying a lot of money. That's just a bunch of rubbish. You need Yahweh. So examine your way. Remove all that's hurtful. Let's make David's prayer our own. And let's live his word out loud. Walk in the power and authority that he's given us as we trample on the enemy and anything that would exalt itself against the kingdom of God, the kingdom of Yahweh. But let's bring life along our journey, not hurt or pain, etc. That is our show for tonight. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. I know you missed John. That's true. I know you did. But I was here, right? We will be back with you in a few weeks. And I am always excited to share. And I'd love to hear from you. You can go to LOW@lifeofworshipamarillo.org. Email us. Go to our website. Check us out. And go catch up on this stuff. I'm going to be adding some of the other teachings that have been there, like Psalm 91 and things, back to our network, Life of Worship Ministries, on our YouTube channel. Subscribe, be a part, and let's hear from you. And partner with us. We would love that too. So until next time, blessings and shalom.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hugie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.